Okay, we're live.
Hello there.
Good evening. Luke and I, we have been ruminating on a portion of the faith
Yeah.
sermon that we read and discussed last Friday, and we have something planned for Friday, but we uh, we we don't want to take up all the time on Friday to talk about this little bit. So we thought we would just pop in here. We'll see how long it takes. Pop in here and talk about what we wanted to ruminate on. But first, I think Luke had a couple questions about chickens.
I did. Because there's when you decide that you wanna get some chickens,
Mm.
you have a variety of different options to go with. You can go down to the store that sells chickens, and they have them all in a cute little, like, a variety of different, what are they called? Feeding troughs that you can pick your chickens out of or
Mhm,
whatever.
mhm,
It
mhm.
and there's a novelty in doing that, especially when you have children.
Oh,
So
yeah.
going
Yeah.
there and like picking out which chicks you want and bringing them home, and you get to select the different, and usually it's like the kid points out the strange looking one, and you bring home the like runt of, of
The
like
one that
the one
the one
disease,
that's crying in the corner.
yeah, the one that's got one eyeball, and then and you're like, okay, this is a great way to start. But
Oh.
anyways, the 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 reality is that I do want to get into maybe some heritage breed
Yeah.
chickens, or like for instance, you have Icelandics, right?
I have a mix. I had a I got a backyard rooster from my neighbor once because I didn't have any roosters, and the ravens decided to kill my chickens because there was no one to protect them. So they were just picking them off. And I
Mm-hmm.
called my neighbor who I know has mostly roosters because she doesn't like killing them. So because she would hatch out lots of eggs, and then they grow up and then she'd have like dozens of roosters running around. So I called her up and I said, "Hey, I need a rooster. Can I come get one?" She's like, "Absolutely." So I grabbed one from her, and it was an Americana cross, and so I hatched a few hens out of him, and they were crossed to Australorps, which were the original breed that I kept. And they're my Australorp chickens are probably 15, 18 years old.
What
Yeah.
are they? They're not still laying though, are
Some of
they?
them are. Some of them are. Yeah.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
we just had to put one girl down the other day because she hey guys. I hope you don't mind us talking chickens. We're just going to talk chicken for a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, the poor girl, she kept falling over and she couldn't get back up, and she looked like she was trying to preen, and she was, trying to pick on the ground, but then her legs were just and
Yeah.
I thought maybe she would die within a day or two, and she didn't. And I said to my husband, "We got to put her down. It's taking her too
Mhm.
long to go." But
Oh.
anyway, so yeah, and then I got a bunch of Icelandic chickens, and so I've got some Australorps. I've got some Americana / Australorp hens, and my Americana Australorp hens are so cool because they have these cheek puffs, and then they have these little beards, and they don't have a comb. They look
Mm.
really androgynous. Like you can't tell. They're gender
Yeah,
fluid. For the
exactly.
longest time when they were growing up, I'm like, "Are these roosters or are these hens?" I couldn't figure it out.
How would you determine that, as if they were like pullets, or,
Oh,
like,
well, I mean,
yeah,
I usually
you
just
would,
wait for them to crow,
yeah,
When
okay.
they cock a doodle doo, I'm like, "Alright, you're gone."
Yeah, I
It's
like
their
that.
it's the death knell.
Oh, no. Oh,
There's just so little room for male animals on the farm, right?
No, I
You
get
you
that.
don't need more than one of them. Or well, actually, I've got 4 roosters because I got a number of chickens. But
They got those, yeah, the libido.
so you were asking about.
Yeah, I am curious if well, my curiosity truly is like I know that I've heard rumors, and I don't know whether or not to believe them, but that like a lot of the chickens that you would get at a place like a place that shall not be named, a commercial branch store that has locations all around the region, they would come medicated and vaccinated and all
Yep.
sorts of different
Yep.
things, where if you were to raise them at home, you wouldn't run into some of those what could develop into issues down the road with a flock of chickens. Even just like
You mean you wouldn't, if you raised your own, you wouldn't have chickens that were protected from disease, and you might end up with problems from that?
no,
Or the opposite?
almost like the opposite, like
Yes,
chickens that
because I was gonna tell you that,
prone to disease because of all the
yeah, my Australorps I got from a breeder in Vancouver, and he vaccinated them all the chicks. And those birds have always had issues. They sneeze, they have pasty butt. They, like they just, I mean, they're old, right?
Sure. Yeah.
They're old, but they've always had something. And then I've got all my backyard chickens, like the ones because I hatch out eggs. I have an incubator.
Yeah.
And they're just like robust,
What's the
Totally
entry
robust.
price for an incubator? Do you know?
I
Look it up.
I think I paid 200 for mine, but that's Canadian dollars. And
Okay.
I'll tell you something. I made the mistake of buying a Chinese incubator on Amazon. Don't do it.
Okay.
Don't do it. They're like completely enclosed, and they're styrofoam. They're called Hovabator. I don't know. They're made in the Prairie provinces in Canada, but I think they must sell them in the States too.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
We got chicken lovers in the chat here.
Yeah, we do.
Chicken chat. And Mick why are you so glad you caught this? You want chickens?
I'm just excited because we got about a month and a half, and this will be the first time that my son's at the age to actually, I don't know, engage with the selection of the chickens. And last time we got buff Orpingtons and black Australorps, and they're great. We love them. They're wonderful birds, but they both lay brown eggs, and if we could get a little color in our mix, or
buff Orpingtons and Australorps are awesome hens. They're quiet and they're friendly, and they're fat and they're classic looking, like.
And you raise them young enough, and they they can be handheld, and like my son, he hardly has to chase them before he's got them in his arms, and
yeah. Well, on my farm, that would mean they would all be eaten by something.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe we're a little too tender with these chickens.
Well, the friendlier and the slower and the less cautious they are, the deader they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you've got them all cooped up and with a fenced run and everything, that's totally different. Mine are free range. So
yeah, once we moved on to this property, that's been the thing, was they're free range, but now they're in the neighbor's yard, and the neighbor has a rooster, and these ladies love that rooster. They visit him every day, and
well, then just get an incubator, because they'll all be bred.
Well, he's inside of he's in captivity.
He's in a run. He's in a run.
They just visit him from
through the fence.
Through the fence.
Like the boy in the striped pajamas.
He's a bad boy.
Sorry, that was a bad joke.
It was a pretty good joke, sure.
I have a very dark humor, so
Oh, it's wonderful.
it goes with my personality profile. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I try to keep it under wraps. You don't wanna even know what I'm thinking half the time.
Girl Country has to bring it out every now and again.
Okay. More like the women fawning after Ted Bundy.
Man,
Oh, that's hilarious.
President Fox, man, he's on it.
That's
He's
cool.
on it.
Ah.
Ooh,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's dig into this. All right, so I'll tell the story. There's a little story, but I was I was listening to our conversation, like the last Friday's live stream. I was listening to it in the car when I was on my way to town, and we got to this part in the essay, and I was like, "What the? How did I miss that?" Like, and and then I just, I don't know how many messages I sent to Luke, but, I was just like,
Mhm.
"This is like, oh my." So we decided we'll talk about it. So I'm gonna read it's out of the essay, it's out of the faith essay, and I just have an excerpt, that I copy pasted here on my computer on my iPad. Um, and, oh, hey, let me, I wanna drop a link because I would love it if people would jump in and just
Seriously.
brainstorm this thing with us
Don't
because
be intimidated by us.
oh gosh.
Join us.
Okay, there's the link, everybody. So get ready, okay? If you've got thoughts on this, please join us because this is really interesting. And you'll see. Nothing will serve God but this, that our faith in him shall be complete. Go instantly with our perception of what he is. It is by the vision in our souls, the feeling and perception in our souls of what God is, that we are able to believe in him. Okay, so that was the like that's what stood out to me when I was listening in the car, and I'm like, oh, okay. Let a man once see God as Christ saw him, and he believes. He does not see him perfectly, and his faith will never be absolutely complete until he comes to that point when he recognizes the character and being and relation of God to himself. And then he believes. I'm going to read that again. He does not see him perfectly, and his faith will never be absolutely complete until he comes to that point when he recognizes the character and being and relation of God to himself, and then he believes. And any glimmer of the truth in regard to our Lord's nature helps us to believe, enables us to go on and on and on, so that you see that the same thing that the intellect does with Euclid, the whole mind, heart, intellect, imagination, conscience, and will does with regard to God. When a man sees God and knows him, the man says, I know enough to make life a grand and blessed and strong thing to me, and I am going on. We will see. I cannot convey to you, he may say, my conviction. That will only come with the conviction itself. You must see, else you do not know. But life to me is enough. And I think right after this, Luke, doesn't he go into, because I've just got something copy pasted. Doesn't he go into, when you wake up in the morning, do you say God is life? I'm gonna have to check it.
What is your first thought in the morning? Is it God is life, or is it how am I to order my day's work? Is it
Oh,
God is
okay.
good and rich, and I am his
You're
child,
there.
and he will see to me?
Yeah.
Or is it how on earth shall I get through that this lies before me today. Are you afraid? Are the cares of this world troublesome to you? Well, you have not got on much. Yeah.
Okay. So my first thought when I heard this was that he was talking about the God. Yes, McMo, please.
Yeah.
Please. The God, this is the God of your own understanding. And I had just, and I keep referencing back to this, but it's all there. So if you need to, if you want to watch it, you can. But I just had that conversation with Wayne. And in that conversation, I talked about how people would hold up God to me, like a theological image of God. And they would say, this is God. And I would say, no, this is not the God that I know.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize, right, that image. And I often felt, what's the word? Like unsure of that. Like I often felt like, well, can I just have my own ideas about God? Like,
Yeah.
Like, or do I have to sign on the dotted line in order to really know who God is? And so, and I often, I often doubt my own convictions, although I can't really let go of them, right? Like I'm really not able to just not listen to them, kind of thing. So anyway, and then Luke, you had some really great points. So I think I want you to talk now.
Well, I'm trying to remember what I said to you in that
Amen.
text
Amen.
exchange, but yeah, amen. Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like because there's a large collective of people that usually will subscribe to a specific doctrine.
Mhm.
And if you happen to have any other thought outside of that specific articulation, or you might have some sort of nuance to it, you might not even fully disagree with it, but maybe there's more to it than that, or maybe it's what is that saying? I feel like I hear it a lot. It's both and. Because oftentimes a doctrine divides. It's putting in it's taking. Hi.
Hey, what's up, y'all?
Hi. How's it
Good
going?
to have you here.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
so glad to be here.
it's awesome to have you.
Yeah.
I've not met
Sorry.
you. What's your name?
I'm you can call me McMo. My government name is Matt, if you prefer that kind of thing.
I kind of like Matt, but
Yeah,
I'll call
you
you
can call
Mo.
you can call me Matt. My mom prefers Matthew over Matt, so McMo is even a further step from my mother's wishes, sadly. But my name is like John Smith. It's like if I told you my last name, it wouldn't even be. You couldn't even hunt me down. You'd Google me and find 7 athletes and 4 starving actors. So yeah, it's no problem. And what's worse is I'm an artist and I'm even below all of those schmucks. So, but Sherry, I made a piece of music with a clip from your, I can't remember what stream it was, but it was when you got preaching.
Oh boy.
And you said, "You are a child of God. Am I holy? Am I righteous?" I listened to it a
Yeah.
million times, so
Oh
I
wow.
have it memorized now. But you said, "You're a child. You're a baby, and you're gonna cry, and you're gonna shit your pants." And it was like, it was exactly what I needed to hear that morning or afternoon or whenever it was. And so I was like, "Wow, I'm just so grateful for you, Sherry." And I caught
Thank
you
you.
guys last stream, and Luke, I thought everything you had to say was just incredible. And So I'm
Yeah.
very excited to be on with you too. But to get back to the poem, one of the first lines that you said or that you read was to see God as Christ saw God. And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if I'd ever thought of that so explicitly, but what came to mind was Christ on the cross saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Mm.
And that being my kind of individual, personal connection point in my dark night of the soul, and kind of it pissed me off a little bit when I realized that like Jesus had gotten to my nihilism far before, like far before me, and like that God Himself had doubted Himself, and now I'm here just kind of
Mm-hmm.
behind Nietzsche, behind Schopenhauer, behind all these smart people, and here I am just a little dude in Savannah, Georgia, who was being sad for for really the first time. Uh, that's not true. I was sad for a lot, but yeah, and then but yeah, so that kind of struck me. I wonder what you guys think about that, especially when I heard the rest of the poem. It kind of kept coming back, like,
Well, it's not
my
a
God,
poem,
why
it's
have you
a
forsaken me?
sermon. It's actually a
That's sermon.
sermon.
That's right, sermon.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You got thoughts, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, I immediately had flashbacks. That's what happened. I just went back to my own dark night of the soul.
Sorry.
No, it's great.
No, let's talk about this. Let's talk about
Black.
this. Let's talk
Yeah.
about
No, I remember moving into a house with like 7 other guys, and we were all going to this like super tiny little Bible school in Spokane, Washington, and
I imagine. Sorry, this is my dark humor again. Like I just imagine like a whole Bible school in a tiny house.
oh yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
But it was kind of like that. I mean, I shared a room with 2 other guys. So it was 3 guys to one room, and the confined space that we had, it was just ridiculous. So it was like perfect makings for stripping down me to almost nakedness, and there was, oddly enough, this place in the basement where there was like you'd open the door and it was like the laundry room on one side and then just a rock quarry on the other side, like almost like it was just raw rock.
Yeah. The old foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, this doesn't even make sense. There's like, but anyways, that was where I would go, and I would pray and meditate, and I was always trying to. At that point, I had no idea how to like do anything in like, how do you commune with God? I don't know. Let me give all these different things a shot, and let me talk to these people who are supposedly wise, not trusting my own intuition at all in any of this, but just being like, okay, this person says to do this, so I'll try this, and here's the 5-step program to try to connect with God. And I do remember asking for God to reveal Himself to me in that little rock quarry. And what I was asking for was crazy. I was asking for God to show me His face.
What? So good.
Yeah. And it's like,
Good.
how do you even begin to prepare yourself for something like that? And how did I think at like 20 years old I could, especially after reading the scripture that no man has ever seen God, so it's like,
Yeah, you're like, I want to be the first.
yeah, I'm gonna be number 1. Yeah, I'm gonna make that.
Gonna get to the top of that mountain.
Yeah, and then what proceeded to happen was I did not. Well, how do I don't know how to say it. At that point, it was no reply, no answer, nothing on the other end of the phone.
Well, I was about to say, you almost literally asked for the rocks to cry out.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I think that like their silence was their
Their
outcry.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that
Amen.
too. And I just want to kind of turn it back before we get too far away. I want to turn back to this reading because George, in the essay at one point, I don't remember where, but he talks about, are you afraid of the thing vanishing? Are you afraid that it's going to vanish on you? Right.
Hmm.
And this false notion of Christianity that you have, it needs to vanish. That's what he says in the faith essay.
Amen.
And so it's like, that's the moment when McMo's like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Right. And that's the moment where you're like, okay, I need to see your face because you're vanishing, right? You're vanishing from me. But what's vanishing is the false notion, right, of Christianity. And so it's a revelation, if you think about it. Like this dark night of the soul thing, it's actually a revelation. And what it shows you is that there's nothing there, what you have, right? What you have is empty. And what you're looking for is a face, like something that's personal, right? Like you want something real. And of course, like I said, before, we have this etiquette around God, and we think, like, I could even see it in your face, like when you were saying, I asked to see God's face, you were like, like, is that the right question? I don't think there's a wrong question, right? When it comes to to these.
Yeah. And that what that made me think of too is because there's also a vanishing. So there's a vanishing of like the false self that needs to occur. But there's also, if you'll indulge me, I had a mystical experience that I have told very few people about. And part of the reason is because I can tell you people, God told me it was a secret. And he said,
that's what he does. That's what he does,
yes.
actually.
And so like there's an impishness, that's probably not the right word, but there's a silliness, I think, to the interaction, the holy interactions that I've had. But a part of that was he gave me this grand revelation, and then he started pulling it back and saying, you're not going to remember this, and you're not going to be able to explain this, and you're not going to be able to take this and make yourself look good with it. It's a secret. And it's just for you. And so part of the secret was you can't, it was a humbling of like, you're not going to be the next Billy Graham, buddy, bucko. Sorry. That's going to be the Canadian guy. But then it's also, but it was also like, it's a secret. It's an inside joke. This is just between me and you. Like, we'll laugh about this. Like, I'll remind you and it'll be awesome. Like that. So it's not just that like, God there's a vanishing. And that's why what you said, Sherry, towards the end of what you said was that it's a revelation of who God is, because there's almost this constant receding so that you can expand, into him. And
I've talked to, I don't know if you know who Joseph is, Joseph Ratzen. And I've talked to Joseph about this at length. And it's such a beautiful concept in Judaism. About the hiddenness of God and the game of hide and seek. And this is what Song of Songs is about. Mm-hmm. It's hide and seek, right? And he just sent me something today that I could read because it's really good about this.
Read it.
Yeah.
This is from a rabbi named Joey Rosenfeld. The secret of the no that is inherent in our relationship with the Torah. Okay, so that's what he's talking about here. Every time I feel like I'm grasping, it evades me, but it's not an evasion that causes me to move backwards, to feel that I'm despised by it, but rather it's an evasion that draws me closer, like the secret of the Song of Songs, and the way that one relates to the infinitely unfolding process by which they can unfold the ancient new words. The Zohar used the metaphor of a beautiful maiden without eyes. We stumble until Shabbat, when we stare down into the dark heart of the red wine in the cup that we are about to bless and encounter our own eyes in the dark reflection and see the world through God's eyes, that they were there the whole time. And in this way, we learn to see in the dark chaos of the 6 days of the week, retrospectively appreciating how each failed grasp and stumble pulled us forward to this moment, where we have yet to fully grasp God, but we felt his gaze peeking through the window, his touch leaving the door handle warm, the flutter of air as he walks through the garden. We glimpse his trace in the world, his back, as it were, and we continue to play hide and seek, ever chasing him further up and further in. Yeah.
Well, I think that's about it for tonight, guys. I'll see you next time.
So my immediate thought in that that reading is, as I think about God's hiddenness, is also the veil that almost so earlier this week I got in a conversation about the idea of how the idea of desire and how seduction plays on desire and constantly pulls forth from desire. And then we talked at length about, we've talked at length on Grail Country about the feminine and the feminine character of God, which is suppressed. It's submerged. It's sort of behind this very prominent masculine sort of understanding of God's character. And when you were reading that, all I could think about was that feminine, more subtle, more veiled, more vague, more ambiguous, more it's pulling me deeper, it's pulling me further, it's playing on my desire.
Well, and that makes me think of like the difference between a mask and a veil, first of all, and how a mask is like, I tend to think of a mask as like like the Jabberwockies. Why was that the first thing that came to mind? The Jabberwockies. That's a mask. But my wife was veiled on our wedding day, and so it's a covering. But that I could tell it's my wife. I wasn't fooled into marrying her sister.
Luckily.
Thank goodness. Yeah, her sister's great. Whatever. Her sister's actually converting to become Catholic. But
oh wow.
Yeah, crazy. Life's crazy. But then the second thing, the difference between the divine masculine and the divine feminine, if we can go there for a split second, like the difference imagistically, I'm going to try to stay G-rated here. Yeah. But imagistically, the cross thrust up into the air with a naked dying man on it, and exposed, bloody, visceral, versus like what you were talking about, desire. And when I hear desire now, I can't help but think of Luke, think of Peter Rollins, the lack. And so you can think of the difference between that up thrusting cross and that void of lack, and how God uses both of those things, I guess, to pull us towards him, and how
whenever this kind of discussion comes up, and it comes up a lot, I just want to remind people that we are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Okay, like this is the imagery.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the imagery, bride and bridegroom, and
Yeah.
we're talking about virgins, and we're talking a lot of
Right.
sexual symbolism, right? And
Yeah.
sexual union, and like Eve is taken from Adam, and the man is built to desire a wife because it's not good for him to be alone, which is a huge deal in Judaism, by the way. And the two become one flesh, so they return back to their original state, right? And I mean that's kind of the story we're in, right? The Garden of Eden, right?
Yeah. It's also where we all come from.
Oh, we all come from.
Hard to avoid.
Yeah, and it just kind of it gets different. It gets different names, and it gets different language, and and different stories are used to illustrate it. But that's really what we're involved in. Like in one of the live streams recently, I addressed the term theosis because I felt like it was misunderstood. This is what theosis is, right? In the Orthodox Church. But like getting back to the thing here, the mystical experience is the lived experience. Like Nate and I had a recent conversation with Rafe Kelly, and when I asked him, like I said to him, how do you feel about mysticism? Because he's out there living, right? He's running around in the woods, and he's jumping and playing, and he's talking with people, and he's, doing meaning making and all that kind of thing. And for me, that's mysticism. That's what it is, right? It's living. Mm. But he didn't understand that question the way I understood it. He understood, there was a lot of, oh, good, Jason's here. There was a lot of baggage for him because his parents were New Age, and that, a lot of terrible things happened. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Jason.
And
hey, guys.
And so it was like, I don't know. I just remember after having that conversation with him, I wanted to take back that word somehow, because like this is what Luke and I talked about when I was ruminating on this piece here, because at the end of it, George MacDonald says that a man says, I know enough to make life a grand and blessed and strong thing to me, and I am going on. And then his naysayer says, well, we'll see. Right. Mm-hmm. And when the man says that, he's talking about his own experience. Oh, shoot. Where'd he go? He's talking about his own experience, right? He's just talking about life. I know enough to make life a grand, blessed, and strong thing to me. And the naysayer says, we will see. And then he says, I cannot convey to you my conviction. That will only come with the conviction itself. You must see, else you do not know. But life to me is enough. Okay? So like this is how he ends his paragraph. Like he's talking about living, just living as a human being in the world with all its difficulties and all our doubts and all our fears, because he talks about that further on in the faith essay, right? And now, what was I talking about in the beginning? So that was the time.
I don't know. I hopped in the middle. Sorry.
Yeah.
Were you talking about the way in which George MacDonald's taught? He's taught in that quote. He talks about the completion of our faith.
There he is.
Or the completion of our faith being.
Well, you said this. You actually said, I'm gonna drag this out. I'm gonna quote Luke. Okay. Because what he said was
I can't remember what I said.
I gotta find it here.
Pee pee poo poo.
Well, while you're finding it, Sherry, I had a question for you. Maybe you can answer it after. But I didn't really understand that I even was a mystic until I worked a manual labor job. When I
Yeah.
was
It's called
when I was a student, and I guess I could have known when I was kind of a kid and playing really hard and doing sports and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I was an adult and had to do things with my body that I didn't really want to do every single day that I really needed, I guess, that kind of, or I finally felt like I had that connection or something. I don't, it's hard to put into words, I guess.
Well, yeah, because what kind of job was it, did you say?
I washed windows. So I was kind of up and down ladders all day, hanging
Yeah,
out of
yeah,
windows in Asheville, North Carolina. So in the
yeah,
mountains too. So it was out in
yeah.
nature. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like you have time for contemplation, right? Like you have, like, I know this from farm work and Luke, from his job, and
Yeah.
so you have time for, you're living, and then you're thinking about the things that you're living through. But I just want to read this really quick, and then we can talk about it more. Luke said, "I think the completion of our faith in some way is that that realization of our own integrity. Not only that our perceptions of God in the privacy of our own experience, sense and emotion and thoughts, intuitions, conceptions, reasons, cognitions are true and real and valid and can be trusted, but also that our conviction of who and what God is cannot be conveyed to others. In some sense, who must experience him in their own very personal way, as George says, by the vision in their souls." And then his final sentence was, "Life itself is enough to inform a person." And I was always really taken by the phrase in the Orthodox Church that there is no theology without mysticism. And I think a lot of people think that when they hear that, they think of some monk, spending hours and hours in the Jesus prayer, but most of them don't do that. Like, they literally are working in the garden, washing windows, making beer, or I don't know what, dipping candles, and that's their mysticism, right? It's life. It's life. And I just really want to, like, to me, this is like the good news,
Mhm.
It really feels like good news to me, because George goes into it right after this, where he says, when you wake up in the morning, do you say God is life? Because if that's how you're living your life, like Sanjay says here, I can separate mysticism from a communion with God. Yeah, you can't. Oh, can't. Sorry. Can't. Right. If you get up in the morning and say God is life, then you are communing with God. Like, you're in the zone, right? You're having that conversation, and there's a what's the word? Sacramentalizing of everything when that happens, in my opinion. I think Annie Mae said something up here. Where is it? Earlier.
Well, and I think too, like, part of it is that God is life might not be the exact thoughts that you think, but it's the gratitude for the cup of coffee can be God is life. The going out on your front porch and seeing the birds already awake and already kind of fluttering about the trees like they've got business to attend to, when really they're just hunting worms and trying to make more little baby birds. And it's just like that, I think that part of the problem is because I think about my father, who struggled for a long time in his life because he never heard the audible voice of God. And he's for some reason thought that that's what should happen, is that he should hear God's voice. And so I have a heart for people who hear that and think, well, my first thought, well, one, I don't remember it because I'm so groggy. And then two, it might, what do I do? What do I do? I can't control my first thought. My first thought is not that. So, that's where my thought goes. But I also know what he's talking about. And those are the best mornings in the world. And I want every morning to be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, because what George says in that quotation at the beginning is, he says, go instantly with your perception of what God is.
Mhm.
That's not a discursively reasoned propositional idea of who God is. That is, go instantly. I mean, it's talking about almost like your if I could go so far as to say it's almost like a precognition, or a pre-rational understand, which to me is very
It's intuitive.
it's intuitive. It's a sensory emotional experience of who God is. It's a felt sense of who God is. It's not a reasoned sense of who God is.
Mhm.
And that's what appeals to me so much, because it's like, that is what, if my constitution is informing me of who God is at all, it's not through my rational, deliberative, um, uh, uh, whatever.
Reasoning.
Yeah, it's really this felt sense.
And when you wake up, it's not the thought in your head. It's the feeling of your dead leg from your dog sleeping on your knees.
Yeah. And it's
That's
that
God.
aroma coming off that coffee, and it's walking
Yeah.
out and watching the steam come off the whatever, and seeing the birds, and getting the sunshine in my eyes, and it's all the rest of that. And I feel like that is informing me more than any of my rational contemplations. Not that those aren't also important. I'm not trying to deny that, but I'm just suggesting that immediate, even though I can't articulate it. It's vague. It's ambiguous. I can't put it into a proposition. I'm sorry. I don't give a flying F word. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah.
it's
I'm
like,
totally there
show
with
me a
you.
cardinal.
Well,
Yeah,
I think you said last Friday, Luke, you said something like, I had to go up for another altar call because my definition of a word changed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, think about that. Like, then we haven't actually entered into a knowing a person, but we know a fact, right?
And what is a child? Like, a child doesn't.
Yes.
Is a child operating with these definitions, or is he learning? Like, he hasn't defined anything yet,
Mm-mm.
or she. You know what I'm saying? But
Mm-hmm. You got any thoughts, Jason?
Maybe not at the moment. I'm just trying to. I just saw you guys on here, and I was excited. And I just pulled over into a Walmart parking lot, and I was like, I'm gonna hop
Awesome.
on. So I'm trying to catch up on what you guys are even talking about. You're on the faith.
Okay,
is it
I'll read you the
higher
excerpt.
faith sermon?
Or actually, in the description of the video, Jason, is the
Yeah.
excerpt that I read. So if you want, it's not very long. I put it in the video description.
Oh, it's probably on the YouTube one. Let me see if I can pull that back up.
Oh no, never mind. I'll read it. I'll just read it.
Yeah,
It
read
says,
it again.
nothing will serve God but this, that our faith in him shall be complete. Go instantly with our perception of what he is. It is by the vision in our souls, the feeling and perception in our souls of what God is, that we are able to believe in him. Like, that statement just blew me away. I'm like, he's talking about the God of your understanding. Okay. That's what he's talking about. Let a man once see God as Christ saw him, and he believes. So he's also saying that this is how Christ saw. Christ had an understanding of who God was. Okay. And like, I haven't even really digested the depth of that statement yet, but it's seeping.
Yeah.
He does not see him perfectly, and his faith will never be absolutely complete until he comes to that point when he recognizes the character and being and relation of God to himself.
Mhm.
right? And then he believes. And any glimmer of the truth in regard to our Lord's nature helps us to believe. So when we see Christ, we see little glimmers of that image of God that we hold in ourselves, right? Enables us to go on and on and on. So you see that the same thing that the intellect does with Euclid, the whole mind, heart, intellect, imagination, conscience, and will does with regard to God when a man sees God and knows him. The man says, I know enough to make life a grand and blessed and strong thing to me, and I am going on. And then his naysayer says, we will see. And then the man replies, I cannot convey to you my conviction that will only come with the conviction itself. You must see, else you do not know. But life to me is enough. And like I read way back in the day. It's on the Grail Country. I read the Hidden Life by George MacDonald, and that poem just keeps coming up in my mind as I continue to read through George MacDonald. Like I listened to Jason's story last night from Wow Riven, and
Oh my God.
and
I woke up to a text from Luke Thompson this morning and said, you should learn to read before you do another one of these. I was like,
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was knitting and listening. It was wonderful.
no.
But the thing is, it's a story about a girl who nobody ever notices and a man who nobody knows. And they're the heroes of the story. And George he's kind of constantly on that theme of these hidden lives, right? And I mean, the man he's like the town idiot, right? And the girl is like the town hopeless romantic who gets jilted and has epilepsy. Not anybody that anybody would really want, right? And yet they hear the call of the bell of the churchyard that is also neglected and overgrown, right? They hear it, and their lives were just, well, he says that, actually, Luke. He says that in the faith essay. I'm going to find it. He says something about the simple, obedient life. Remember?
Oh yeah, he says almost. It's not verbatim, but just the most mundane proceedings, like just to proceed. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I don't know exactly.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. I got it. There is a better and stronger faith coming. It was a great thing that this foolish, actionless kind of religion should vanish, and that a simple, obedient, hoping, trusting life should take its place. And then he says this great line here that I think is so pertinent to the times that we live in. The world is not worse than it was. Right?
There's a lot of people that would disagree with that.
Sure.
In this day and age, isn't that just what we hear constantly? That this is as worse as it's ever. This is the worst it's ever been. The worst
it's ever been. But nobody ever lived through the First or the Second World Wars, or lived in communist Russia, or all that. But after what I read here, he says, "But friends, what we have to do is let our light shine." And I'm kind of veering away from the excerpt a bit, but he talks about the burning bush, the bush that burns but is not consumed, right? And and I guess for him, I'm just from the way I know his writings, that is what the simple, trusting, obedient life is. It's a burning bush, and it transforms the world. And and he says in the faith essay, You don't go out and you don't follow, you don't follow, you don't try to be an example to people. You just shine, right? And so it's like, now I lost my train of thought. I read a comment. It was gone. Anyway.
Can you pull up a comment by Sanjay?
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a different one, actually.
Oh, okay.
Further,
That
you still need a thinking system to process that experience.
Okay, here.
And I don't disagree with that. And I don't think George necessarily does
No.
this in this thing. And I'm a little bit maybe more zealous in that moment, talking about, waking up in the morning with the jubilous nature. But he goes, so that you see the same thing that the intellect does with Euclid. The whole mind, heart, intellect, imagination, consciousness, and will does with regard to God when man sees God and knows him. So it's like, it's just like that it's not just an intellectual endeavor, but that it involves the entirety of human cognition that we've limited in modernity to the intellect.
Just the intellect. Yeah.
Which it's like, there's so much more. There's so many different modes of valid knowledge and degrees of knowledge that have nothing to do with intellectual processing or discursive reasoning. Right. So like, yes, you have to bring it into that space at some point. That's natural and real. And I think that's going to be the inevitability that occurs, but it's not, there's so much more that we restrict ourselves from, we don't qualify all the rest of it as valid. We dismiss it all and we say that that's not valid. That's not real knowledge. That's not any kind of knowing. That can't be a part of our epistemology, And when it's like, no, that's actually maybe more so a part of our epistemology than almost anything that we'll find in the intellectual sphere. So it's like, that's the point, I guess.
Right. That's the danger of living so much inside of your head that you can't separate the experience from the processing of the experience. And so, because I mean, we know this anytime you get in an argument with someone. The processing of the experience is basically a complete reworking, a complete retelling, trying to come to grips with what happened, because that in the experience you didn't know what was happening. You were reacting. You were, your things were happening that you couldn't process. They were happening faster than you could process. Or maybe it's just me because I'm very agreeable. But so that's where my mind went to, because if you are so worried about processing the experience, and that you think that the processing of the experience is more important than the experience, then you'll constantly be living with your kind of eye in the rearview mirror, and you're going to miss the feeling of God resting on your leg as in the shape of your dog who should be sleeping on the floor. You're going to miss that because you're going to think to yourself, my first thought wasn't God is life. My first thought was, man, my feet are clammy. Like that's, that's the danger that you're kind of speaking to, Luke, of kind of the temptation of thinking that thinking is the point.
Or that in thinking, in your thoughts, that your thoughts are your way of knowing God.
Right.
Because
that your sensory emotional experience has nothing to do with your understanding of who God is.
Okay, so here's a simple question. How do we get to know one another? How have we all gotten to know one another? Did we read our biographies? Did we talk? We have conversation with each other. And that's how we get to know one another, right? And that's how we build images of each other in our minds. And of course, because this is a virtual space, those images are very incomplete. God is like the most virtual, if you want to talk in those terms. But I mean, the only way that I could understand God for myself was to talk to him and then to hear back from him. And, you know, like I made that point with Wayne in the conversation that, you know, we dismiss, because we live in such a rational world, like we dismiss experience, life experience. But when we open our Bibles, that's all we're reading about. We're reading the life experience of all kinds of people, right? And it's in their own experiences that they receive revelation from God. And it's so profound. Their own experience is so profound that it's been written down and preserved for all time. So yeah, it's like I'm not saying we need to run around seeking experiences. What I am saying though is that, and I said this to Luke earlier too, you know, I've said this a number of times, God animated us with his life, with the breath of life, right? So the breath that we have in us is God's. Our life is his, right? And I've always perceived that as his gift to us, life. That's his gift, you know? That's the gift we give to our children, right? When we have children, we give them life. And what do we want to do, want them to do with that life? Sit around rationalizing about it or live it? Like we really, really, really want them to live it, right? Because, you know, and for George MacDonald, like if you go back to the imagination essay, for George MacDonald, we're in God's imagination. Like creation is his imagination, right? So that's our playground, people.
And it's almost like what he was like, the thing with the Euclid, like I'm trying to figure out what exactly he means by that, because I take that kind of in the way that you can take Euclid geometry and predict the way perfect solids act in free space or whatever. But to me, what more feels like he's asking, like he's saying, like you can level up. Like it's not so much a sequential thing as it's you can, because like you were saying, Luke, it's not anti-intellect. It's at the end of the day, it's going to be we have to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and body, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and then the other thing that made me think of is like when you start to see Christ in all and as all, that's when kind of the simplest, it's not the fancy dancy Greek or Latin words that start coming to mind. It's the simplest truths. It's, you know, I'm a child of God. Hallelujah. All I have is Christ. Jesus loves me. This I know. Like those are the things that that's why it's so embarrassing to be a mystic, because you come back from the mountain and you're like, Jesus loves me. The Bible told me so. Like,
but you're like David dancing half naked through the streets because you're just like the depths of it is so incredible, right? Yeah.
I'd much rather be an idiot, you know, and have the revelation than be a smarty pants and be, you know, in the void.
I recently listened to a conversation with Martin Shaw, and he talked. He remembered an experience he had before he was a Christian, where he was with this shaman, and he said to the shaman, "Grandfather, it looks like it's going to rain." And they were getting ready to go into a sweat lodge, and the man said he looked up at the clouds for the longest time, and then Martin said he just started talking to them for like 20 minutes. Had this like, as if he knew them his whole life, right? Started talking to these clouds. And Martin was like 23 or something at the time, he was young, and he's just taking it in. Like, he's like, this guy is like for real. He said, I feel like I'm looking at a real human being, a real human being. And then he looked at Martin. He said, I'm not from here. Right. So there was like, and that reminded me, Jason, of the thing about fairies, where when they, some Englishmen went to Newfoundland or something, and they wrote back that there were no fairies in North America, no fairies in Newfoundland. And David Bentley Hart wrote a thing on this that I read, and then they said, well, that's because you're not from there, right? You're not from there. So there's like the enchantment is attached to a geographical place, and in order to understand it, you have to be from that place. And then Martin said to him, Are you is it going to rain, you think? And the old guy says, no. And it didn't.
Wow.
So anyway, I don't know why I told that story. Well, I guess because McMo was talking about how you feel kind of dumb. You feel like a little kid. And I've said that too. Like, sometimes I want to say things and I think they're just so stupid and silly and obvious. And when I say them, they sound kind of dumb. Like,
Yeah.
But
or trivial or something.
Yeah. And like, I'm wondering, as I'm saying all this, like, why have we lost that? Like, why have we lost that kind of simple, obedient, trusting life? Does anybody have a clue?
Probably because to get back to the little excerpt, there's a certain sense in which we don't trust ourselves.
Yes, Sanjay, I am. Sorry.
I think that like, I don't know what I was just saying, but
I'm talking about, like, how did we lose like the simple, trusting, obedient life? Like, where do you think?
I don't know. Your question reminds me of the movie Hook, though. I don't know why. That's my favorite movie ever. Yeah, your question of like, when did we lose that? Because that whole movie is just, I think, based around the idea of the loss of your childhood, basically, the loss of this childlike wonder.
It's the same. You could also ask the same question: when did we eat the apple? And I know when I did. But I don't know when you did. And I know all the ways in which I built upon that mistake and that sin, and all the ways in which I pushed it down. And so those are there's so many ways, so many reasons why we can't have the simple.
Hi, Chad.
What's up?
Chad.
Hey. Yeah, I almost wonder. See, this is maybe a different spot that I'm into, but because I'm not a parent, but I almost wonder if that gets kind of thrust upon you. Because when I'm thinking of the movie Hook, he seems to lose it through the responsibility of having children. So when you bring a new life into the world, you're responsible for that life. And I feel like that almost kind of thrusts you into a point of being more judgmental or analytical, and kind of, because you're having to be responsible. So you're almost like, you kind of almost have to decide, or this is just, you can tell me if I'm wrong, this is just being my guess, is you almost have to dissect life a little bit more to try to make sense of it, to protect that new life you just brought into being. So with the new creation coming into being, it's almost like you are thrust into the position of a judge, of becoming God, because you're now responsible for this new creation you brought into the world. And so maybe that's where you lose it. The only reason I would seem to guess that is because I feel like that seems to be somewhat of a pattern that happens with a lot of parents, is like you see the parents and their children, there's this weird disconnect, but then the children and the grandchildren seem to connect on another level, where like the responsibility of the direct parent is kind of skipped, and then the grandparents are allowed to be children again with the grandchildren, and so they're like refining their childlikeness in this. And so like there's this weird. That's the only reason I say that. It's like somewhere in there, I think it gets lost because the judgment, because just maybe the responsibility of it so much. I don't really know. I don't know the reason. I'm just guessing or speculating, but.
Well, that also makes me think about me and mostly my wife jokes. But I agree with her wholeheartedly that if it weren't for her, I would just be a crazy hobo on the side of the street, asking people for change and asking if I could sing my little song for them. And, so there is an element of like, we don't have kids, so it's not what you're talking about fully, but there is an element of like, I need to be at least acceptable enough to not, put shame on my father-in-law's family and stuff like that. So, like, yeah, it's the cares of the world, I guess.
Yeah.
But they can become strangely dim.
Is
what's
that
the
that's a
question
song?
again?
How did we lose the connection to a simple, trusting, obedient life? A hidden life?
Well, is
I
it?
don't know. Maybe we didn't.
Yeah.
I think like
Well, I did. I don't know about
Right.
you, but
Well-
I certainly lost it. Like I lost it. My life was so racked with anxiety and worry for the future. And I mean, I was farming and all that stuff in the meanwhile, but the trusting obedient thing was not happening for me.
right, but do you have it back?
Yeah, but I've got a retirement check coming in the mail every month,
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm thinking of is like if one decides for some reason, maybe even they don't decide, maybe they just drift into, let's say, what we like to kind of describe as like modern being or modern living, which is more of a self-obedience, self-centered thing. It's still, I think, an adventure into a type of enchantment that says it's not enchanted. And then like maybe you have to go into those depths sometimes to see like maybe because you don't trust that you're willing to obtain an obedient simple living on your own, so like you'll go against it, and then maybe life will slap you back in the face and say, here you go. And I don't know, I think that's I know it sounds pessimistic, but actually I think it's quite optimistic, like.
Well, you're talking about like you're talking about a U-shaped journey, right? Like
Right,
getting
and
to the bottom of something.
it's not a conscious adventure, right? It's like God had let me basically slap my face against the wall as much as I damn well pleased, and in doing so softened me so where I could be apprehended. I got this really great story coming out tomorrow. This commenter lady, Diane, she came on. You guys are gonna love her story. Oh my god, I don't want to tell it, but it's like a lot of this stuff is. I think we're, that silly saying, "You're right where you should be." Maybe you're right where you should be.
Well, as we were talking about how this stuff sounds silly.
But it's like, it's true though, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm right where I should be.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. It's totally true.
I
mean, I just wanted to mention before Chad has to go, because sometimes he just pops out. But this excerpt, Chad, it that I read, it's in the description if you want to read it over. It's essentially George MacDonald is saying the only God that you believe in is the one of your own understanding.
Right.
Okay. And that we get glimmers of truth when we look at Christ, his life. We get glimmers of truth that cohere to the image that we have, the God of our understanding, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's like, and like Luke and I did that essay on Friday, but I missed that. I was listening back to our conversation in the car, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Did he just say what I thought he said? You know?
Yeah. Well, this is a thing that I do have to roll real quick, but this is a thing that's really been on my mind is what happens when we turn Christ into an idol.
Well, that's essentially like I said in my conversation with Wayne, I said, people would hold up this, and it was mostly like pastors or, people who were concerned for my soul. They would hold up God and they'd say, "This is God." And I'd say, "No, it's not the one I know. It's not the one I know." And I can't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, my belief comes, and this is what George MacDonald says here in this excerpt, it comes from my knowing God. It comes from the God I know, right?
Mhm.
That's where my faith is
Right,
situated.
but it's also like I'm imagining that's also something that is quite dynamic. Like this is crucifixion and resurrection. When we place even our own knowing, like the God of my understanding becomes so static where I got him, right? I got him in the box, and then he's like, nope, I'll die right now. And
Yeah, but no, the way he's talking about that God of your understanding is he doesn't use the term God of your understanding.
Right.
It's the life you live with God.
Yeah.
Right. Like he says here, our faith in him shall be complete. Go instantly with our perception of what he is.
Mm-hmm.
It is by the vision in our soul, the feeling and perception in our souls of what God is, that we are able to believe in him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because he's talking about faith. What is faith, right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for. That's the verse that he uses.
That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, it
is incredible, Jason.
That's gonna make me think about that a lot more. Because the whole time you've been talking to, I've been thinking about, me and Cal just had that recent conversation about Psalm 82, you are God's. And so just thinking about, you talking about the God of your own understanding and how it seems like it's always limited unless there's a way I can look at people that way. And as soon as you look at a person that way, a person's infinite. They just have this infinite potential about them. And when I was talking to Cal, I said, we said that the easiest way, I think, for me to actually enter in through that door to try to see people as God is to talk about an infant that way, But then the way you're even mentioning just like the God of your own understanding being the life you live with that person was making me think of like the person you're married to. Like there's a way you'll know them intimately, but you'll never fully know them. And then having that deep longing in the soul, like even if you think you know them, there's always this hope of like just this realm in your soul that they still occupy that's always infinite in some way. Kind of like that image, like I think PVK mentioned it was a long time ago in one of his videos, but he was just talking about like the Westerns, how there's always this riding off into the sunset. It's like there's always this
ongoing story.
Yeah, that still is in your soul. Like even if you go through life with God and everything in your life is God's communion with you, it's like there's that just leads to like a further longing in your soul for like the more that could be. Even if this life is bad, it's just like, or you think it's bad, it's just like it still leaves you with that, I don't know, something there.
Well, what do you think of this? Like as you grow, like we talk about ourselves growing as Christians, right? As we grow, so does God.
Yeah, God. Yeah, like you said, God's becoming is our becoming. Yeah.
Right. Like like he gets bigger and he gets more whatever. I don't know. Like it just depends on how you perceive it.
I think about that a lot. I think about that just in the simple fact of like how we say God is love. I'm like, if more lives keep coming into the world and we're called to love people, it's like then love just continues to grow, and then God just continues to grow, and then he's continually infinite. It's like he'll never cease growing because love is always continuing to grow.
Well, I always. Oh, go ahead.
That made me think of I must decrease so that he may increase.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
I was thinking of Meister Eckhart when he says the eye with which you see God is the eye with which God sees you, right? And that quote actually from Joseph is similar in the sense that it's where is it now? Here.
Well, and as you're looking for that again, also to kind of Chad's question, what happens when we make an idol out of Christ, has been resonating in my head, and there's a way in which if you treat Christ like an idol, then you will not you will not be in relation with the true Christ. That's what
George Smith says that actually, doesn't he, Luke?
Mhm.
But then and then as Christians, obviously we don't think worshiping Jesus, if you're truly worshiping Jesus, you can't be doing idolatry. And so, yeah, that to me, that's very interesting, where it's like that kind of difference between treating God or Jesus Christ like an idol. And then it's the fact that Christ is always sneaking up behind you, and he's always, meeting you at the empty tomb, kind of a thing.
So instead of a devil behind every bush.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Child.
Yeah, that's a good point, Luke.
Yeah.
Because when I started, like when I started that more mystical portion of my life, like walking and talking with God, all the demons just disappeared in my life. Like I wasn't afraid of anything anymore. I wasn't like, and I remember a time when it was like, you got to watch out for demon possession, and that could be a demon, and there's a demon over there, and that, she's manifesting a demon, and he's, and they just disappeared. And I don't think I chased them out. I think that I just didn't see them behind every bush anymore, I'm just wondering, Sanjay, what do you mean about I don't buy that idol premise? I'm not sure what you meant by that. Maybe you could elaborate.
It's hard to. I don't know what that means either. I would guess that would mean kind of, that's one of the things I really appreciate about Jacob. I think that guy gets on the cross way more than I do. The way he just gets in these conversations and stands like I'll get on his stream and he'll be like, he'll have a rabbi in the comments like pulling him this way and another person's pulling him this way, and he just hangs in there. But Jacob is, my conversations with him, he's asked some questions that have really, I think you can easily dismiss them, but to take them seriously, I mean, I think they're very good questions. And Jacob's point about, Christ occupying the singular man Christ, when he is so focused on, and it's like Christ is the only Son of God, then it becomes idolatry in some way. But I think it's almost like you can't really even go that route per se, because then you get to.
Well, I think that's.
And he says we're all sons of God.
I think you're stuck. Like if you start, I don't know if I'll be able to say this the way I want to, but when you start parsing, like, right, then you've actually lost the spirit of the thing. You've lost the spirit.
Well, and it almost, well, I guess what I mean, I don't know if I'm getting at his point where he says I don't.
I know what he means by it. I know what you mean. I've heard Jacob talk about it.
Yeah.
And I could say some things, but I'm not going to. But it's like, and it's not against Jacob. I see what he's saying, in a way that is probably many people would not be in agreement with me on that. Let me put it that way. But
redirect the conversation.
This is kind of like when you want to talk about whether Jesus was divine or human, or how much of divinity was there and how much humanity was there. You know what I mean? Like now you're getting into quantity, and this is not about Spilled beans. This is not about quantity. It's about quality.
Mhm.
And that is this animated spiritual realm, right?
Mhm.
That we find ourselves in, and we can feel it,
Yeah.
right? But we can't talk about it. It's not graspable, right? It's not yeah. So I want to avoid all that. Like I just do. I just want to
Yeah.
avoid it
Right.
because
I
I think
understand. I wasn't trying to. Maybe I
I'm
wasn't
not
like
trying to,
trying to stir the pot or anything.
I'm not telling you that we can't talk about it. That's not what I'm saying. In my spirit wants to just let it go, right? Just push it out to sea. Because if I engage with it, then I'm lost in the quantitative.
Mhm.
And I'm no
Okay.
longer in the qualitative. That's how
Yeah.
I feel about it. And I'm not sticking my head in the sand, my hand in the sand.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
there's a
I
weird
think
way. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah,
I
there's
do have
a
to head out, guys. Though, sorry.
oh
I'm
yeah,
really
sorry. No,
sorry.
you say your piece because
Yeah,
you gotta
say
go.
your thing. Yeah.
No. Oh, well, I was just gonna say that getting into the quantitative thing, I think that's when you move into that realm, that's when you see, like, Christ before me, Christ behind me, and and then you say, when do we see you, Lord? And he says, you saw me here, you saw me there, you saw me there. And so I think that you lose the capability to do that when Christ becomes idolatry, I think was the point. But when there's a way Christ can become so focused on where you're not able to see him in before me, behind me, and this and that, or whatever else. You don't see the qualitative nature of Christ in all things. But that's all I was going to say, I guess.
Mhm.
But I do have to run, guys. I'm really sorry. I
Yeah.
only got a few minutes before the store closes.
Yeah. Go.
Yeah.
Going to
Thanks
Walmart.
for joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm
In your RV.
Yeah, I'm in Florida right now. Don't know where I'll end up tomorrow. It's been fun though. It's different.
Awesome.
It's weird, but yeah.
Cool.
It's expensive too. I thought it was broken. I got stuck in South of Macon, and it was like my engine was making this bad ticking noise, and I was like,
Oh no.
done.
I have
And then the next morning,
lots of friends and
it
family
wasn't.
down there, Jason.
Oh,
if you,
really? Sweet.
Yeah, if you break down somewhere, I have people who can.
You're in Savannah, right?
No, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee right now for work.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I
you're
live
traveling.
Yeah, I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm originally from Savannah. And my social security number is.
Yeah. Good. Well, yeah. I don't know. Maybe we're not too far away then. Maybe if I'm ever in like up that way or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I travel all over the Southeast for work, so
cool.
It's more likely that I'll catch you. I guess if you're traveling around too, maybe we'll just meet at a Walmart parking lot or something.
Yeah. All right. Well, good night, guys. It was great talking.
Yeah. Drive safely, Jason.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
well,
there's an element to kind of and it's kind of funny. It just because I've only really been around for like a year and a half or 2 years, so I'm not kind of an OG, but I'm aware that there's drama, and that some people like other people more than others. But there is an element to this secrecy thing where it's like it's really hard to talk about, especially with our Jewish brothers and our Muslim brothers in the future, maybe. But like because there's this element of like, if you are saying that Jesus is not God, then that's gonna hurt my feelings because he's kind of my best friend. And that's what he goes by, like he likes being called that. And but then there's also this element of like, I can put myself, I think, obviously not fully, but in the shoes of some of those other people and saying like, no, you're literally worshiping a human as if you were God. So I obviously see that. And I don't think we're going to solve any of those problems here tonight. But I do think that kind of like personal aspect is why it is hard to talk about, because it's as close to home as I could think. Like, like even more so than I wouldn't want to like badmouth my wife on a live stream because she's my best friend and I love her so much. Like, I also it's hard to kind of not just take Christ as God and as everything as an assumption and move from that point.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Because I do that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like we have to be really careful not to like I often think God's often said to me, I don't need any defending. I don't need any protecting.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Right.
I got this, you know? And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, right. And what do I know anyways? Like honestly, what do I know? I even said to Wayne, like, one of the things I had to admit was I don't know who God is. I don't. But I know he's good and I know he loves me. And that's all I know. That I know for sure. And one day I will know, right? But right now and people are like, "What do you mean?"
You are where you should be.
Well, this is like I've just arrived. That's how that feels.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. And I often get an image of, when it gets into those kinds of conversations around here, because everything's great until you talk about my thing, right? And it's like, that's my toy. Don't touch my toy. Kids in the sandbox, right? And and so it's like, well, yeah. And I don't know. I don't know what I was going to say about that. It's just interesting. I guess.
It's a miracle that we can talk about all of this stuff as civilly as it is often talked about. I think
it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful to me.
Absolutely.
And if George is right, okay. If George is right, and for me he's always right. So
St. George.
Our faith in him shall be complete, go instantly with our perception of what he is. It is by the vision in our souls, the feeling of perception in our souls of what God is, that we are able to believe in him. So what the hell does it matter? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if Kessie and I differ on the details, I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. To me, doesn't matter. And I can honestly say that I don't know how Kessie feels about it, or Joseph, but I can honestly say that they are my brothers. Right? Like I do feel that kind of connection, because I think God is our Father, and I think that he is the Father of all of humanity. And so that's just how it is for me. Mm-hmm. And all the details, like that gets back to my, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know who God is. He, like I said to Wayne, he is the ineffable one, the name that cannot be named, which means I don't have a grasp on it. And I never will.
Even if you were the namer of all namers.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what really got me there, with. And then he implicates Christ in that same scenario. Let a man once see God as Christ saw him, and he believes. I'm still thinking about that sentence, Luke, because I'm like, what the
what the hell does that mean?
What does that mean,
He does not see him perfectly, and his faith will never be absolutely complete until he comes to the point when he recognizes the character and being and relation of God to himself. And then he believes. When I hear that, I'm like, wait, God's being in relation to myself? what does that mean? So it's like that's where I get stuck, is because that truly is the how can I read that again?
Yes,
Like
please.
he does not see him, God, perfectly, and his faith will never be absolutely complete until he comes to the point where he recognizes the character in being in relation of God to himself.
Yeah.
And if we come to terms with the idea of something like theosis, that sheds an entirely different light on that entire sentence, because it's like your very character, your very being, your ontological, how do you say it? I don't know. I'm not smart. You're,
Say it dumb. I love it
say
that
it
way
dumb.
anyway.
You're
Say it dumb.
your very your very existence itself. I don't know. When your being aligns with God's being, when your character aligns with God's character, and I don't think that's always how we see it, like as if we have to, as if it's always a movement into, as if it's always a movement into some place that you aren't already at.
Mhm.
As if
Yeah,
it's
I was about.
as if it's always a movement outside of who you already are, rather
Yeah.
than recognizing that the integrity, this gets into all the integrity stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I don't even, we were, at some point we would probably get very,
Mhm.
very involved in that conversation, but it's like, how do you encapsulate it all? But
Well,
that, yeah, please talk.
I almost had this vision, or like this image in my head of my true self hidden in Christ at one end of this long rope, and on the other end is Christ hidden in me, and that's the kind of them, my true self pulling towards the Christ in me, and the Christ in me pulling towards my true self hidden in Christ kind of image. And so like that's because it's we get both of those images right in scripture. And
Isn't
so
that the subtitle of your name right now?
oh, is it? No, that's not.
Okay.
I forgot what I put there for a second. I was like, did I? I've never had this thought before, and so if I had put it in the title, that would have really freaked me out. But no, that was the image I got while you were talking, Luke, and it probably was influenced by the comments popping up too. But there is something there with the like hiddenness of our true selves in Christ and the hiddenness of Christ's true self in us, and that's almost like we wouldn't exist at all. We would never have been born if that wasn't the point.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I got to address the never have been born thing, because this is so interesting, because there's a lot of biblical language about it would have been better that he had never been born. I think actually I talked to Joseph about this once. If Kessie's still listening, maybe he can chime in. But that's a rabbinical thing, right? Like it's like, and we covered it in Job, because Job wishes he had never been born, and the question was that, what was that? Like, is that a bad thing to say? Is that suicidal? And upon thinking about it, I realized that it's actually the only place that you can avoid any suffering, is if you had never been born, right?
Mhm.
Like if I don't exist, if I never existed, I wouldn't have nothing like this would have ever happened to me. Right. And so to exist is to be in God. Is to be in God. Like it's so yeah.
And I often say Christ when I could say God, and I should probably just say God, but I often say Christ when I mean God.
Well, yeah, no, it's fine to say Christ. I think it's fine to say Christ.
I
And
censor myself all the time like that, and then I'm like, dang it. Yeah, and then I go back. Yeah, I do that all the time.
It's funny because I had a conversation with a girl once, and we talked about saying God and saying Jesus, and there was neither one of us felt really comfortable saying Jesus because it felt too familiar. So we used the term Christ. But oftentimes I find now, as my consciousness evolves, that I use the term Christ in regards to a kind of consciousness,
Mhm.
right? I find myself just gravitating in that direction when I'm thinking about a kind of evolved consciousness. And when I'm thinking about relationship, I talk about God, something like that. Not that that's should be a rule or anything like that, but I'm just kind of, this is my glossary of terms or something. But yeah, because, and these things are so fractal too, right? Like they don't just stay at this like static place, like somebody wrote here, Christ equals the church. I would think that I would think that the church is also Mary. It's where Christ is born, and Christ is born in us, right? Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation, and it goes in crazy places. So
Yeah, I was about to say it's also because it's also the bride of Christ, and that there's the trope of you always marry your parents or whatever. It's like kind of funny if because my wife is very similar to my mother in some ways, not in all ways, thank goodness, but yeah, that's funny to me. I've never thought of it that way. Like, yeah, if the church is also kind of Mary, it's like Jesus' bride is a lot like his mom, hopefully.
well, just as a side note, a long time ago, we had a discussion about, I had this body question, and one of the things I realized is that when the scripture talks about Christ being born as a virgin, of a virgin, this gets at that whole integrity thing that I've talked about, and I haven't talked about this actually, but it came back to my mind when I was listening to the conversation about it the other day, and that is, Christ is always born of a virgin, right? And so one of the insights that I got was that this integrity, this wholeness, right, this integerness is also uncorrupted. Like, it's virginal.
Yeah.
And that's where the Christ is born.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Incorruptible too.
And incorruptible. Uncorrupted, virginal, and incorruptible. Yes. All those things. And I think that the symbolism of the Virgin, the bride of Christ, all of that stuff it's all tied into that whole thing, which is like, just kind of threw that out there, but yeah.
I had been thinking about for like the last 45 minutes just what Chad said. Like, you're where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, that's what George says at the end of the quote.
Yeah.
He says, but life to me is enough. Right?
Mm-hmm. And that is how that relates to integrity is important to me, but I don't know how to articulate it. And I've been trying to think about how to articulate it, but it's just like this idea that, here, I'm going to try.
Good. Yeah.
That I'm going to struggle too much.
I have an idea. Tell me what you think about it.
Yes.
The link between the integrity and God placing you exactly where he wants you for such a time as this, I think, is that oftentimes when we're not being integral, when we're not being virginal, we're kind of, we're being tempted by our desire. We want reality to be different than it is. And so we put on whatever. And so if I'm being inauthentic, if I'm not having integrity, I'm going to put on this false self, and I'm going to act in a way that's not. And so a real acceptance and a real, dare I say, belief that God has you exactly where he wants you, and that it all shall be well, that actually gives you, is it strength? Is it freedom to be virginal, to have integrity, to be pure, and to be made pure,
Yeah, and then there's another thing there, because what happens to the virgin is she's pierced. Her heart is pierced. So to be that person is to be vulnerable. And we know this. This is why we mask. Right? We mask
and we should veil.
Yeah, we mask because we're afraid of being pierced.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that along the lines of what you were thinking, Luke?
Yeah, it is. It's along the lines. I think the way I would, if I could attempt to nuance it further, would be to suggest that, like, I don't know, where you can trust where you are right now, and that is not a because I think we get into these places where, like, God can't move and work in my life right now. God can't be even close to me in any way, shape, or form. And it's this almost lack of trust in who you are, in your integrity. And I would suggest that, like, your integrity is there before the foundation of the earth, before you've ever entered through your mother's womb. Like, there's something innate to your integrity that cannot ever be taken from you from anybody else, and you can't even remove it, regardless of what you do. And so it's like this idea that you are where you're supposed to be is this trust in who you are, and trust in I mean, ultimately, that's a trust in who God made you to be. So it's an acknowledgement of your image that is made in God's image, And so, I think that's what I'm trying to fundamentally get at is like, this can't be messed with. Nothing can mess with this. There's nobody can take this from you. There's nothing that can touch this.
Yeah.
And, like, I think that's what, like, I get goosebumps when saying that, because it's just like this idea that I could lose my image. Like, or I could lose the image of God, that it could be taken from me, and that it can be trampled on, and that I could lose my light, that my light can be stamped out, and that it can be squashed, and whatever else, man. I just am like, I cannot believe that anymore, because I just don't think it's true. I don't think that people's lights can be snuffed out.
I love that. Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, that's it for me, guys. See you later.
Yeah, and so ultimately that is faith in God, right? Like, when you were saying that, I was thinking that's exactly why God said to Satan, "Have you seen my servant Job?" That's why he said it. Can't snuff it out. Doesn't work. That's my image is stamped on there. My strength is made perfect in weakness, right? And yeah.
I think we forget it. I think we forget that we're children.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun little game, though, right? Because the
It is.
remembering is so nice. The remembering is so good.
Mm-hmm. And then when we do, then we enter into that simple, obedient, trusting life, right? That is the child.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, when I was sorry.
And then when we get up in the morning, we say, God is life.
Yeah.
I actually had a little turning point. Like I was saying to Chad, well, I don't know, like my life was just riddled with anxiety. Like you don't even know the half of it. But I remember the turning point where somebody said to me once, what are you going to do? And it was a financial thing, right? And it had to do with my animals and their care. And if I can't care for my animals, like I just want to take them out and shoot them one by one, because if they suffer, I'm going to die. Like, and I can't give them to anyone else because nobody else can look after them as good as I do. Like that's kind of how I think. and so I'm just like, and I'm walking. We had Highland cattle at the time, and they were all on the hillside, and they were laying down, and they were chewing their cuds, and they had their calves. And I mean, you've never seen anything so cute as a Highland calf. And
Curly hair, right?
Yeah, they've got red hair, and they look like little what Ewoks. That's what they look like. and so I'm walking past them, and I look up, and they're on this hillside, and they're laying down in the trees, and I'm like, my father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. They're not mine. They're not mine. They're his. Right? And he loves them way more than I do. Right? Like, and then this is one of those silly moments where you're like, where it just seems like, you come home and you're like, guess what? My father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. There was like, and it just so happened that the problem just resolved itself without I couldn't have done anything about it. There was nothing I could have done about it. And I didn't have to shoot any of them. Which was really a blessing in disguise.
I don't think it was disguised. I think that was a blessing in the plain daylight, that you didn't have to kill your animals.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
But that was a turning point for me. Like that was a serious turning point where I just started going. Then I started getting up in the morning and saying, God is life. God is rich. And I am his child. And really like taking seriously Jesus's statement when he says, consider the lilies of the field,
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And it's really exciting, like to live like that. Like, it's so exciting. Like, it's the most adventurous adventure ever. It's really Bilbo Baggins, and Frodo and all those guys. Every day.
Fire.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He loves me most. Sorry, everyone. I'm number one.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I just, like I said to Luke in the on Friday when we did the whole thing, the whole sermon, I said, what I want to do in this space is I want to tell the more beautiful story. That's what I want. That's what I've wanted for a long time, and I did feel intimidated slightly because, people are using the big words and worrying about the big things and, all that stuff. And I'm just like, he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and consider the lilies of the field. And, do you wake up and say God is life? Because I'm telling you, and George MacDonald says in the Faith Essay, he's like, this is what transforms the world. That,
That
And
reminds me of
even in Judaism, Kezi, back me up here. You know, this is when the days of the Messiah, when no man needs to be taught, right? It's what it is.
Yeah.
It's what it is. And it's the burning bush, you know, that is not consumed, right? But it burns.
Oh my goodness. I should get to the end of that essay if I can pull it up at the
Please.
very end. Oh my goodness. I would have you then, friends, remember that faith is the trying of things that you do not see and that you cannot be sure about. The thing that you do not see and which, not seeing, you have doubt about, you can yet try. That is faith. And if you are honest, that will be a great opportunity and a great help to you. It will start a fresh faith which you have not thought of before and give your life a new start. Faith is intended to put to test the unseen world of truth, love, law, hope, redemption. God grant us faith enough to carry on from point to point until the faith shall vanish into light. And we never have to think about faith more, nor think about church more, nor the Bible more, nor prayer more, but our whole being shall be a delighted consciousness in the presence of God and his Christ.
There you have it.
It's like, oh yeah, I'm using hand motions to try to communicate now.
That's awesome.
Oh.
Well, I'm pretty talked out, so I think I'm gonna call it for me, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think we are too. Thanks for joining us, Mo. It was really great. It was really great.
It was
Thank you.
awesome. Appreciate y'all. Bye.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you too. Yeah, that was a perfect way to end it, Luke.
Yeah.
Just a delighted consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joy and peace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There we go.
I've been hitting that slow decline for the last.
I seen it. I saw it. I saw it.
Yeah, it's happening. I always start to go down.
I had a short conversation with Joseph this evening or this afternoon, and I said to him, you know, I'm so empathetic that it actually I can feel other people and even like that's why this is not real to me. Okay.
Mhm.
Because I seriously
It's through the screen, even this
Yes.
virtual technology, you can still feel you still feel the presence of the room.
I do.
Yeah.
And you know, people just have to say something and I'm like, oh, they're suffering. And then I'm like, you know, and it's just it's sometimes really
Yeah.
really, really tiring. To put it bluntly.
Well,
I had to actually make some room for myself when I was sick because of it, because it's just so overwhelming
I
sometimes.
mean, and then if you're working through that on a live stream or something like that, like that's
Mhm. But I mean, I was just loving that last little tirade of yours. It was so good.
I'm glad.
It was so good.
I don't know if I like doing that very much.
Well, what was it Chad said? We are where we're supposed to be.
We are.
Just a little reminder.
Yeah. I can't believe we started this chat talking about astrolorps.
I know. Chicken.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Tomorrow is the big back to chickens. Let's wrap it up with chickens.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is the big day. I have to try to get that egg out of the prolapsed vent.
Yeah.
And you guys will have to look that up because I'm not going to describe it.
But this bird is facing a crisis that is existential. So
Prayers for my little chicken, and she's so beautiful. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you posted.
All right, please do.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And I loved all the comments and the questions. And it would have been great if people please join us. Like,
Yeah.
don't be shy.
We might do this again on Friday, but
We're
actually,
hoping to. We've got some things up our sleeve, so we'll see how Friday goes.
yeah.
Anyways, thank you all, and good night.
Good night.